What's up, humans, and welcome to a late night Psicoactivo. To me, it's still Wednesday, but it's Thursday for a lot of you. So, good morning. Okay, so I got a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. The first one being the fact that I told you guys that one of the videos that I did for my members channel could only be viewed there does not mean that I want your money because I got a few messages that kind of pissed me off. I don't know why there's this idea and this like sanctimonious kind of idea that I think it's honestly dumb that people who dedicate their lives to doing this and trying to explore this, if they want to make a living out of it, a decent living out of it, they're suddenly just grifters and they don't seem to have a right because there's someone else who's doing it as a hobby because they can, because they live in the first world and they have the means to do it as a hobby. It's not the same thing, guys. I'm in Mexico. I studied to become a journalist. I was a journalist for 14 years, and I made the decision to leave my career in sports journalism to dedicate my life to this, and that's what I'm doing. So, anybody who comes to my comment section and tells me that I'm grifting or that I'm gonna put things behind a paywall and that we deserve the truth and all of that stuff, you can go to other channels. I really don't mind. Um, just please avoid making those kind of comments because I think that is one of the things that we need to get rid of. This idea that the topic is so pure and so sacred that under this materialistic paradigm, of course, people who dedicate their lives to this, of course, it's okay to make a living. And if you disagree with that, I'm sorry, go to another channel. I don't mind, really. Good luck to you. But please don't make those comments. It's unbecoming. It really demotivates people when they do it because we're dedicating our lives to it. So it's conflicting, really. So please do better if you can. If you can't, I don't know what else to tell you, man. But I wanted to say that. And now we can move on to the topic because I think today was one of the most interesting conversations that I've seen that aligns with Psicoactivo's mission because it is called Psicoactivo. That means psychoactive in English. And the vast majority of the anomalous experience that I've experienced happened because I did psychedelics for a decade and I am a former psychedelic experiencer. And that's the thing. Yeah, it is. For many years, I did think, and I was even convinced that I was clinically insane because there was so much stigma on psychedelics. And I heard so many things that made me truly believe that if I went to a psychiatrist, they would tell me that I was like apt to be checked into a mental hospital. And I did live with that stigma for many years. I lived with a fear of potentially triggering some type of disease like Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that because of how many psychedelics I did because it was a lot. And I still have that concern a little bit though, but now that I've educated myself a lot more and seeing people like Dr. Rick Doblin at MAPS and Mr. Paul Stamets, who's like one of the gurus of psychedelics, specifically with psilocybin. I see all the work that Hamilton Morris has done for many years, although he's a little wild. Who else? Michael Pollan, who did that wonderful documentary called How to Change Your Mind. All of these people in today's world, they are studying psychedelics and their effects, and they're getting some really important and historic breakthroughs, I believe, because psychedelic therapy is now a thing, especially in the US. It helps to treat PTSD. It helps to treat depression. It helps to alleviate addictions to alcohol and other things. I still truly believe that the addictive personality can be suppressed through other means, not necessarily psychedelic. There are many ways to turn off that addictive personality towards many different things. It has to do with meditation, it has to do with a healthy diet, a healthy exercise plan, a lot of reading, a lot of laughing has to do with it. Being in love has to do with it. It has to be like a massive combination of different protocols, just an essential lifestyle. And for the longest time since I was younger, I I started like being taught by my mother and other people who were adults on how to properly manage my own consciousness. The way that I used my mind to create reality in front of me and around me. I used to be part of this seminar. It's called Dynamic Autovalorization 3 from a doctor who is a psychologist who did Gestalt type of psychotherapy. His name was Rutilio Romero. And I went through to like many years of studying everything that he put together in this seminar. And they taught me how to use what they call the observer, which is essentially a tool that helps you visualize things that can eventually happen to you. I already told you guys a little bit about this. With that framework of training, then I went on to become more independent when I was after high school. But I wanted to explore my psyche, and I was also a party animal. So that was not a good combination. So I started on this trip of a decade long trip of psychedelics. I did different types of psychedelics. I did different combinations. I wrote a lot of notes. I read a lot of literature dedicated to this. What strikes me though is that there is not really a lot of medical literature because there are not many studies about psychedelics because they've been illegal for the longest time since the 60s. I also told you guys about this. And when I was in that decade long trip, I realized that these plants and these substances had the capability to improve people's perception of reality. And it was really rewarding to me listening to Shawn Ryan, who I don't agree with on a lot of things, but I do agree with him on this. And I think that him doing psychedelics more constantly is also going to help him reevaluate a lot of the things that his mind goes through.
I don't know any other way to put it. I feel like psychedelics make you smarter. I really honestly believe that psychedelics make you smarter. Smarter at accessing memories, smarter at navigating your life. It just clears all the shit up and gives you clear direction and where to go, and new perspectives on past events and in current events and in relationships and so but at the same time I have a lot of respect for the medicine itself.
And he spoke about psychedelics and about the present dangers of psychedelics because there are with none other than Professor Diana Pasulka from North Carolina Wilmington University. She is one of my top three, top four people that I want to interview on the channel. The other one is Professor Jeffrey Kripal, who I am going to interview on Saturday, and he's really good friends with Professor Pasolka. And she would know because she's been studying a lot of these effects that these psychoactive substances have on people. She studied like the different religions and different traditions, but along the way, she also found out that there's a lot of people who believe that through psychedelics you can access intelligences and a different realm. And that really struck a chord with me because over my decades long trip, uh, I was part of this psychedelic trance culture. So I went to raves and all that stuff. And it really struck me that no matter how many or what type or how strong the substance that I used was, it was never really seeing any type of entities or something like that. I did speak to entities when I was on that some of the times, especially with psilocybin, but I never saw anything. And it really struck me that there was a lot of people within the psychedelic community where which I belong to that did see entities and they described them to me, and it sounded really scary when they talked to me about that. And I always wondered why it never really happened to me. What I realized is that everybody has a different way of perceiving these entities. The way that I did was through voices. I spoke to them, they spoke to me. I spoke to the mushroom many times, and the mushroom taught me a lot of things. I kind of sound like Terrence McKenna here, but it really is true. The mushroom does speak to you, and it teach you many lessons, and it sometimes even scolds you when you're doing something that it believes you're doing it wrong or you're hurting yourself or others. It scolds you. It's a little bit like therapy. And I found it really refreshing hearing Professor Pasulka talking about this and Shawn Ryan apparently getting some interesting insights and improving his life. There was a part on this podcast where he said essentially the same thing that Dr. Greenberg and a lot of different scientists who study neuroscience and different realities or the simulation theory say that it is uh, through our minds, through our thoughts, we create our reality. And there are people that are stronger at it than others. There are people that are doing it consciously. The vast minority are, but we all do it. The way we do it is essentially look at the world, how it is right now. Given that we don't have control over this skill, because it is a skill, the world is the way it is right now. It's on the brink of war in a bunch of places. There's a lot of division, a lot of discriminatory practices, a lot of hate, a lot of violence. And that world that we live in right now, it is possible to change it through thought. But the process needs to be gradual. It cannot be, it's impossible for it to be just overnight. We build up to the world we have right now. So we have to build up to the world we want. It has become really difficult to convince people that this is actually real. I'm glad that, for example, people like Lue Elizondo are speaking about this. They're giving like their insight into what they know about psionics and about this skill that we have of manipulating reality at will. He recently was on a brilliant podcast that I really adore that's called Neon Galactic from James Falk. James and I have been going back and forth. He does fantastic work. He actually has three different podcasts with Professor Kripal. And he recently had Lue Elizondo for the first time. And he asked Lue about psionics. And this is what Lue said. Here it is.
A lot of things came out with Jake Barber's, testimony that ring true for me because of all the things that I've been hearing and learning and the way that things have been talking, but have never really been put in quite so explicit terms. The psionic capabilities. I mean, I can see that happening as a result of the evolution of remote viewing and all of those sorts of things, and how it may have ended up into that space, or at least that was an express and early interest in that kind of thing. But I wonder if any of that took you by surprise, and what you think that we should be feeling about this idea that there are people amongst us who may have special abilities, and are potentially figuring out how to network through the ether to drive these things and land them on the range.
Well, let's break down a little bit when you say special abilities. Every human has a special ability, right? Every human. There's people that can dunk a basketball, and for short, Latino guys like me, that's a miracle. I'd never be able to do that, not in a million years. And so people have physical abilities. People have intellectual special abilities, right? Look at Stephen Hawking, right? Even though that maybe physically his body was compromised, his intellect, his mind was not, right? That's a special ability, right? That's
Sure.
That's a different type of special ability. Everybody has a special ability, if you will. You hear a superpower, so to speak. But at the end of the day, it's not really that super. It's just a specific skill set that may be shared with a smaller portion of the population. And so when you talk about things like psionics for the purposes of your audience, this is the idea or the notion that perhaps that UAP, there can be some sort of interaction between humans and the occupant, or the if you will, the intelligence behind these UAPs, using an untraditional way to communicate. And so what do I mean by that? And I'll get back to the Dobster thing, so I haven't forgot about that. But this is
Sure.
The answer isn't so simple.
No, and this is a part that needs to be covered, and I'm very anxious to hear your thoughts on this,
So
please.
let me ask you something, James. And I don't need to be personal, but do you have family members?
Yes,
Okay.
I have 4 kids and a wife and brothers and sisters, and
So don't take this wrong way, please. But do you love your children?
yeah, of course, more than anything else in the whole world.
Well, prove it to me. How do you prove something that is there's no way, right?
There's no way. Yeah.
There's no way, right? It's
Yeah.
just, there is this. And by the way, I love my kids. My 2 daughters are the greatest
Sure.
achievement of my life, bar
Yeah.
none. But there's no way I can prove it. And also, the way I love my children may be felt differently than the way you love your children. We both love our children, but perhaps the way we experience that emotion may differ from person to person. And so when you're talking about human cognitive abilities, we have those right now all the time. I tell people there's a reason why doctors put little sensors on your head when you've been into a car accident. They're not sure you're dead yet. They're measuring your brainwave activity, right? The electrochemical processes that are occurring in the brain that can be detected, literally electromagnetic emissions that are coming organically from the human brain. Now think about that. We look at it today as common science, but that was certainly paranormal 100 years ago, being able to do that. You mean the human brain is giving off these invisible waves and we can detect them with machines? Well, yeah. And it turns out that it's possible, potentially, to do the same where human brains can get in tune with one another. It's a reason why perhaps twins have a very special relationship beyond just, identical twins being physically identical. A lot of them have reported sharing emotions and sometimes sharing thoughts. Is it really paranormal, or is it just a very least understood phenomenon that involves human beings and nonverbal communication and interactions? Look, when 2 dogs enter a room, we can sit there and see there is some form of nonverbal communication going on. That's why they immediately know, hey, is this a threat, or is this going to be a friend? I'm going to wag my tail, even if they've never met the dog before. So it may turn out that some of these abilities, whether it's reference in terms of psionics or remote viewing, which was a real program, by the way, that the CIA did, that used human cognition to try to conduct espionage on foreign adversaries. There was enough there to suggest that, yeah, there's a real science behind this. Now, it's probably not. The problem is because it's so not well understood, people kind of chalk it up to pseudoscience. But let's not forget that this little cell phone I'm holding in my hand and this computer I'm talking to you over, thousands of miles away, is using a concept once deemed paranormal, the electromagnetic spectrum, right? You mean there is a way to invisibly communicate information and thoughts at light speed across the planet using nothing more than a little device? Wait a minute, there's no way. And it turns out, yes, in fact, most of reality, most of life lies within a spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum that is beyond human sight. right? If you look at the electro-optical spectrum, which is how we judge, we call vision, visible light, is really just 0.0036% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which means we're only really perceiving, 0.006 something of what's really out there. And that's why I tell people, look, we come out to Wyoming sometime and look at the beautiful night skies, and it's gorgeous. Now take that same part of the night sky and look at it through a radio telescope, and you see all sorts of different things, right? You can now see the ultraviolet and the X-ray spectrum and the infrared spectrum, and you see novas and galaxies, and you see nebulous clouds that you can't see with the human eye. And in fact, most of the universe lies outside of that narrow band of spectrum. So the same thing holds true with other stuff, regarding perception and potentially psionics and potentially these other things. Do we have the definitive information to substantiate that it works and how it works? Well, I think we're getting to the point where we realize that, yeah, there's probably something to it, and it probably does work, and it's probably based in quantum physics more than pseudoscience, but we still don't understand it, right? I mean, look, and people say, well, that's silly. How can we not understand, how something like that would possibly work? Well, we still don't understand gravity. Is gravity a field? Is it a graviton? Is it a particle? Is it a result of some sort of strong force that resides in a different dimension, and this is what we experience as gravity, is a bleed over effect? There's all sorts of theories. We don't even understand gravity. We've been living with it ever since we've been as a species on this planet. So, case in point, there's there's a whole lot of reality we just simply don't understand.
Yeah. So essentially, it is more difficult to get to know or experience these skills if you're just doing it through meditation or through other types of practices. And it is a skill like basketball or like, and each person has a sensibility towards a different type of skill. Because you've heard, I mean, I'm a comic book guy. I grew up either watching or reading the X-Men. So for me, it is a little fantastical because I never imagined that there would be people with skills like precognition or telepathy or even some type of levitation, telekinesis, influence on other people. That is also part of the skill. And there are others, such as, for example, manifestation. Like I call it environment manipulation because it kind of feels like that. It's one of the things that I experienced. And I never imagined that it would be like that. So it's, if you're a comic book person or if you saw the X-Men ever, it's a little bit like being a combination between, obviously less fantastical. It's not like that, but it's like a combination between something like Professor X and Jean Grey, something like that. Obviously much more tamed and much more secret because the majority of people don't believe that this is real still, but it is. And I remember that one of the videos that I did a while ago has author John Keel at a conference. I don't remember if it's Brazil or Spain, but he was saying back in the 80s that at the end or the beginning of the new millennium, magic was making a comeback. When he says magic, he actually really means alchemy. And I do believe that there is a correlation between the capabilities that humans have in terms of mental capabilities with the use of some type of substances and psychedelics. The thing is, history has been suppressed for so long about these types of knowledges that we don't really know what works and how it works. The amount of substances that we know right now in the world that do have some kind of an effect on the mind, I would say it's less than 1% of the amount of substances that have existed and known to have some type of an effect on the human mind or psyche. Many of them have been either completely destroyed by the powers that be, either the church or something else. And the knowledge of how to combine them, because there's a lot of combinations that exist, was also destroyed and suppressed by the powers that be. And I found it really interesting that Professor Pasulka mentioned that through the use of psychedelics, we need to be really careful because we can open up something, some type of portal to this different realm. And it reminded me of Dr. Amon Hillman, who, if you guys don't know him, he's from Johns Hopkins University, who wrote a very controversial book called The Chemical Muse that talks about essentially pharmacology and the times of the Roman Empire and when Jesus Christ was alive. He is translating the text from the ancient Greek, which is already recognized to be amongst the oldest texts that exist about the time. And he's very controversial in his claims about Jesus Christ and all that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do believe that during the Roman Empire time, there was a lot of substance usage, and they didn't have the same type of terminology that we use today, nor the stigma, because every substance they used back then was considered medicine, regardless of what it did to you. And I think that there was, just as it is today, there was a lot of abuse and a lot of usage back then. Back then, there were many different things that we don't know today. And there were many different effects that caused in many people in the human mind. I'm not sure if some of these historical figures did use something. What I can tell you is that through the use of psychedelics, specifically psilocybin and LSD, there seems to be some type of ego death experience that helps people improve their lives and reach a higher level of consciousness. Before I tried psychedelics, I heard a lot of these stigmatizations that happened around them. I was really scared to even try them. And when I tried them, I realized that the stigma is there for a reason because it really does change your personality. In my case, it was for the better, but I've seen some cases that haven't been good at all. And that's what Professor Pasulka is trying to warn people about, which I do agree. As a disclaimer, just to tell you, psychedelics are not for everybody. You need to be at least 25 years old, in my opinion, to even consider dabbling into psychedelics. I did it too young. I was 17, about to turn 18, and I did it for a decade. And there are many things that I regret about going down that road so young. I did learn a lot, but I also almost died from them. And I had a fear death experience because of them. And although those experiences are the reason that I probably am doing this podcast right now, I still do wish that I had someone to tell me what to do and what not to do. So I wouldn't suffer as much as I did because I did. But I do think that the stigma around psychedelics needs to go. It needs the perception about them needs to change in a way that people can start looking at them as tools to improve life, and there needs to be a system put in place that can let us know how much is too much and how much is the right amount, and under which conditions and circumstances it is done properly so it can help you. And I think that what Professor Pasulka and Shawn Ryan say here about having respect for these substances is extremely, extremely important. Here's Professor Pasulka and Shawn Ryan talking about psychedelics right here.
Some of this sounds like what some people would call a psychedelic download. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Um, what do you think about that?
Okay, so I know a lot about that actually. And even within the in religious studies, we have a whole group of people who do look into, entheogens, which are psychedelics and religions and religiosity type of things that come out of that. So indigenous people from the United States, like, America, there's the Church of Native Americans, the Native American Church, they use peyote, right? Mm-hmm. And so they utilize plant medicine in order to, in a very structured religious way. And they have experiences like this. So most likely there's a link there. There perhaps what Ezekiel sees is something that maybe, I'm not trying to, I'm very happy to say that, in this environment, like a controlled kind of respectful way of doing, psychedelics, this is legitimate what they're doing. If one's doing it recreationally, I've seen some pretty terrible things to happen with people who aren't respecting that. You can open something up. Mm-hmm. You can open up. Let's just say it's a dimension, because we don't know what it is, but it appears to be another realm that people can access either through psychedelics or through a religious protocol. It seems like it happens.
Have you done psychedelics?
Yes, when I was younger, I did. Yes, and again, I felt like it was something that was okay for me to do because, well, I'll tell you, I did it innocently. So I was a 16-year-old, and my friend had some. Her parents were Grateful Dead people, so they, I know. So they had
the good stuff, huh?
Well, they had mushrooms, and my friend got some. And I already knew at this point, I don't know how, but I already knew that it needed to be done in reverence. It needed to be done. So we actually prayed to God before we did it. And we said, if this is wrong, God, please let us know, but we're going to do this. And it was a really beautiful experience that was, honestly, it was good. But I don't do it now. And
why not?
Well, because I think that I was lucky and innocent when I did it, Shawn. I know that it's helpful for people. I've known people to be, specifically psilocybin has helped people I know recover from things like, say they were on the front and, in various tours of duty, and they've been helped by treatment. So I guess my position is, and I don't guess this is my position, is that when done with the correct intention, I think it's good and all right. Without that intention, it's dangerous. And for this reason, that it perhaps will open something up. And it could be that you do meet something like another being of some sort, that we've been talking about. And that being could be good or it could be bad. Both exist, in my opinion.
What I'm interested in talking to you about is the realm that you go to.
Yeah, the realm is really real.
The realm, do you believe it's a real realm, or is it developed in your imagination?
Right. So
or is it both?
Yeah. So I believe it's a real realm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the reason I believe that is because if you do what's called field research and talk to people either who access this realm without psychedelics and then those who access it with psychedelics, a lot of times they're talking about similar types of things that happen in those realms, like certain experiences, certain things that they meet, like entities and things like that. And so that would indicate to me that that is a real realm. How we access it, I don't know. I do know, though, that I know we're not talking UAP right now, but when I met people who were in the government who were studying UAP, who are studying UAP, they're very interested in this realm. They're interested in this as consciousness is an access point.
What do you mean by that?
So our consciousness can access, and things can access us through, I would call, through something that we have in our consciousness. I think that we're at the very beginning of understanding it, and I think we should be really careful.
Yeah, so there is a sense of almost honor that is deposited in these experiences. When I did it during this decade, there was a lot of partying, yeah, but also there was a lot of, as I told you, it was like an empirical kind of experience that I was writing stuff down, reading up on the different literature. And for me, it was like 80% it was an investigation into my own mind. The other 20% was party for me. That 80%, fortunately, remains with me to this day, all of those lessons that I learned. But that stigma still persists. And I think that this channel is going to try and erase a little bit of that stigma, little by little. And just so people know that this is another avenue that, if done carefully, it can help us reach that next level of consciousness, because I do believe and I am convinced that it does. And I know that I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, because this isn't necessarily UFOs, but it does have to do with some type of communication with a different realm and with entities that inhabit that different realm. And this has been a thing since psychedelics have existed. So people do communicate with something on the other side when they are under this influence. Just to give you one last example, in 2021, I went to the town where I was born, which is Guadalajara. And when I was coming back on the plane, I thought and came up with pretty much the whole concept of Psicoactivo. And it happened just during the flight when I was up there. And when I got out of the plane, I already knew the name. I already knew the logo that I wanted to use. I already kind of knew the topics that I wanted to cover. I still didn't know that consciousness was so tied to the UFO phenomenon. That came later. But for me, it was all about consciousness and all about learning about these psychedelic substances on a more deeper level and how they can help humanity improve and evolve. And I still maintain this same philosophy. I just added UFOs to the whole conversation because they happen to be directly and intimately linked to consciousness. So the fact that one of the biggest names in ufology is talking about psychedelics and the real effect and the real importance that they have is refreshing to this channel in general. And I think that these psionic abilities, Jake Barber already said that they are triggered by some type of use of chemicals. I think at least one of these chemicals are psychedelics. I do believe that, because they do give you access to stuff that you didn't have before. And this includes some type of intuition, as Jake Barber said. And yeah, it gives you a level of control over your environment that you didn't have before. That is real. So I want to hear your thoughts on this specific aspect, but Diana Pasulka and Shawn Ryan talked about a lot of stuff. They talked about Timothy Taylor, which she insists on calling Tyler still. She says that he's anonymous, although everybody knows who he is now, especially in ufology. They talked about Diana Pasulka's belief that it's currently right now what she believes that is happening, which is that we're dealing with angelic and demonic beings. And I still have to tell you that I disagree with that, but I remain open to possibilities. I don't know if that's true. I happen to think that we might be dealing with something different, that it is more advanced than us, but angelic or demonic, I'm just not there yet. I don't think I am. If it's possible, then it is, and I'll stand corrected, but I don't think it is. But yeah, I'm gonna leave the link to the full podcast in the description. I think it was one of the best I've seen in a long time, and I think you guys should check it out. It's really, really good. And I want to hear your thoughts about this use of psychedelics, this access to the other realm, this communication with entities under the use of psychedelics, under the influence of psychedelics. Do you think it's all in the mind? Do you think it really exists, as Professor Pasulka says? And what do you think about these psionic abilities, and potentially how they could be accentuated or highlighted because of psychedelics? Because I know that is the case. I've experienced it. I'm pretty sure Jake Barber knows too, and other people who know about this. That is, in my opinion, that is one of the protocols that you can use to trigger these skills. And I want to ask you one last question, because there's a lot of people that do think that these abilities are not abilities. They think that they're gifts from somewhere else. I disagree with that, because I think that we all have these skills, as Lou said in the previous clip. And I think that as soon as we get that trigger, it'll start like making us more susceptible to these waves that are around us, and so we can tune into them, because our brain is kind of like an antenna, as Tom DeLonge said. I believe that to be the case. But there are people that think that these are gifts, some type of sacred gifts, and I don't agree with that either. If they are, I'm going to have to see proof, and I'll change my mind for sure. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on everything that I discussed today, which I think is very apropos for Psicoactivo, both psionics and psychedelics. Let me know what you think. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video drops. If you want to support the channel in any other way, I'm going to leave a few links in the description. Take your pick. Thank you for the support. And we have a members channel, so you guys can check it out. I have a few videos there, just a few, but you guys can see the output that I'm doing on the channel already. So the support, I really appreciate it. The only video that I have that I don't feel comfortable sharing with everybody is just the one, you know. But thank you for your support always. And that's it for me today. And I will leave you until tomorrow's video. And remember, stay curious. Bye.